Welcome to Selective Coloring in Photoshop. In this lesson, we'll learn how to set up a Photoshop document, import images, change color modes and resolution, make selections, create and edit layers, color on layers, and use blending modes. With Photoshop open, the first thing I need to do is set up a document. I'll go to File, New, and this will give me a pop-up menu where I can set up my basic document selections. I'm going to begin by giving my document a name. Since it's almost Halloween, or Halloween's about a month away, I decided to do something a little bit seasonal, so I'm going to call this Jack-o'-lantern. I'm in the habit of naming all of my documents with lowercase and underscores instead of spaces because I work with the web a lot, and it's a good habit to get into when you do work with the web because HTML often has a problem reading capital letters and spaces. I'm going to click on my preset, and I'm going to drop down and choose a custom selection. This is going to let me go in and add my own custom width and height to the document, as well as my resolution, which is in pixels per inch. I have it set up at 960 by 800 because my last project I was working on was a website, so I had those dimensions already set. I can keep those for our lesson. It's a good starting point for any document. And my resolution is at 72 pixels per inch. That's fine because I don't intend to print this document. If I was going to print this document, I would want to raise this to 300 if I was working in a high output type of printing scenario. Let's say I was going to print for a magazine that has high quality paper, and I'd keep it about 150 if I wanted to print for a newspaper and maybe a lower grade paper. I'd also change the color mode to CMYK if I was going to work in print. Since I'm not working in print, I'm going to keep it at the resolution of 72 pixels per inch, the color mode of RGB. I'll keep this size, and I'll hit OK. That creates a new document that I can start to work with. The next thing I want to do, is import an image that I can begin to work with. I'll go up to File, and I'll choose Place. Once I get to this, I can navigate through my system until I find the area where I have my image that I want to work with. I have an image that I grabbed off the web of a little jack-o'-lantern here, and it's on my desktop, so I'll select that, and then I'll hit Place. That brings in the image with the bounding box. When your image is first placed, it isn't really committed to Photoshop yet. It's sort of a preview. It has a bounding box so you can manipulate size, orientation, position, and so on. And if you don't like the things that you have, and you can't get if you don't like the positions that you have, and you just can't get your image back to normal, you can always just click the Move tool, choose Don't Place, and that'll let you start from scratch. So again, I'll go File, Place, navigate to where my image is at, select that, and I will hit Place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold the Shift key and grab the edges of my document so I can stretch it out proportionately. And I'll go a little bit beyond my working space there, just because I have kind of some extra filler space with those leaves. And I'll kind of nudge it into place. And once I get it where I want, I'll go back and hit the Move tool, which is the triangle at the top of your toolbar. Select that, and then I'll choose Place. That will commit my image. Now, my document was a little bit off. I didn't have the proper measurements. I just kind of shot from the hip when I was setting up my document. So I'm going to change this and crop out this area, which will change the size of my document, but it will get rid of this extra space, so I won't have this ugly white bar. On my toolbar, I'll go a few tools down until I see this square marquee. This is a crop tool. This will let me select areas of my image that I want to basically cut off and get rid of. So I'm going to move it in here, and I'm going to change some settings in my crop tool. I had it set up to a fixed width and height of 350 pixels to 250 pixels. I'm going to select this drop down under width and height, and there I can change ratio. I can use original ratios of the image. I can use pixels per inch and set width measurements. Okay, quite a few options. I just changed it to ratio, and I'm nudging the crop tool in a little bit so the box fits around my image, and then I will click the crop tool again. It will ask me if I want to crop the image, which I do. I'll select crop, and there we go. That got rid of all that space that I didn't want. To get rid of that tool selection, I'll just go back and select the move tool. And now I want to zoom in a little bit. There are a couple ways to zoom in when you're working in Photoshop. You can come down and grab the magnifying glass and zoom in, or you can use one of the few shortcuts that I like, which is Control Plus on a PC, or Command Plus if you're working on a Mac. I used Control Plus, that zoomed me in, and I can see over here. Let me just get rid of that little pop-up. Sorry about that. I can come over here and make some changes. Now this is a file I downloaded from a website called Morguefile, which is got free to use, royalty-free images people put up. And I just grabbed this for something to work with for the sake of the lesson. But I want to change the name of the layer here and some information. Now this has the file name associated with it, and that doesn't tell me anything. File 925129, etc., etc. So I'm just going to double click on that layer, and that'll open a name field that I can now edit. So I'm just going to come in here and I'll call it Jack-o'-lantern. Okay. Now I can use uppercase letters and spaces inside of my Photoshop layers. I could also use them inside of my document name if I chose to, but like I said, whenever I name documents, I like to keep that pretty standard. It keeps me from making other mistakes when I'm working inside of Dreamweaver or preparing documents that I want to use on the web. So I name this Jack-o'-lantern. I can also change the layer colors if I want. On my layers palette, excuse me, on my layers panel, there's a small drop down arrow. If I click this, I get a bunch of options that pop up from the flyout. I want to come down here until I can find some different panel options. Okay, so I hit panel options, and then I have different thumbnail sizes. With this, I can increase the size of the layers. I'm going to cancel that. Okay, I'm sorry, the size of the thumbnails on the layers. I'm going to cancel that and just show you there are some other options here. You can choose blending options, you can make groups from layers, you can merge layers together, several different things. I just clicked that and got rid of an extra layer that I didn't want to have just by doing a little double click and disregarding it. Okay. Now I double clicked on the layer itself, and I'm going to set a couple of things up. Okay, there's a layer named 0, and I kind of undid the work that I just did when I discarded that background layer. So just to kind of correct that, I'll come back and retype. Okay, jack-o'-lantern. So I'm kind of making more work for myself, but that's all right. And where it says color, I'm going to choose this drop down and I'm going to assign a color to this layer. Now, even though the pumpkin in the picture is black, orange is going to kind of help me recognize that it's a jack-o'-lantern layer, and that's going to work for me. I'm going to leave the mode at normal and the opacity at 100%, and I'm going to hit OK. So now I can see that it reflected a change over here. Now it's called jack-o'-lantern. It's an orange layer, and that's going to help me identify it. That's going to work with my brain so I can understand what's going on. Okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this. The reason I'm going to make a copy is I may need to refer back to it for some reason. I may make a mistake. I may want to start over. There are quite a few reasons, so I always copy the layer that I want to have retained in case there's a mistake. So what I do is I just grab this layer, I drag it down to the bottom of my layers panel where there's the new layer icon, and I release. This little icon that I'm mousing over is kind of universal inside of Adobe software. It's basically whenever there is some type of new object or new layer, new item you're going to create, it looks like a kind of a little page peeling over. And that's going to be something you see quite a bit in any Adobe software. So now I have two copies. I have the original and then I have the copy layer itself. So that's good for me. So what I'm going to do is click on the original, and then I'm going to go to this little padlock right here and click on that. That locks the layer, so I can't bump into it and start making mistakes unless I come in and edit this by clicking the little padlock and unlocking it. So that kind of keeps things safe for me, which is good. I'll go back and select the jack-o'-lantern copy, and this time I want to zap this color out of it. Okay, if we're working with an image, let's say we bring in an old image and it has sepia tones or faded color, we always want to desaturate that image and suck out all the colors so we can start from scratch with a black and white area. So I'm going to go to Image, Mode, I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, and then I am going to choose my desaturate options. Which is going to be right down here at the bottom, and the shortcut is going to be Shift Control U. I'll go ahead and hit this, and there it goes, it desaturates. All right. So now we have basically a black and white image. This is devoid of color. I'm going to show you two techniques. The first technique is going to work with something called variations. Now, the reason I'm showing you two techniques is because variations isn't available on all versions of Photoshop. When you have a higher bit version of Photoshop, 64 bits and so on, the variations tool will just not be available. On older versions of the software, you could go in and change which version you want. If you wanted a 32-bit version or a 64-bit version. On my computer right now, I'm set up with a 32-bit version of Photoshop, which makes the variations available to me. It's also available in a PC. When you're on a Mac platform, there have been some issues, and a lot of people are confused as to where the tool's gone. Well, it's not really a tool, an option. And it's just something that may not be available to you depending on your system and how you're set up. So the first thing I'll do is color something in variations. And then I will go back and I'll color something using layers and layer properties. Okay, but before I color anything, I need to make a selection. All right, so I'm going to make a selection around this pumpkin, and then I'm going to color the stem, and I'll color the eyes separately as well in the mouth area. So you can make selections a bunch of different ways. You can use the quick selection tool, which is my preferred method. You can use the magic wand tool, or you can use your pen tool and actually draw out a path and then convert that path into a selection. which is definitely the technique that has the best control to use the pen. I'm going to try to use the Smart Selection just for, the Quick Selection tool, just to kind of speed things up in the lesson and get the point across, and you can always go back and experiment with other techniques later. I'll hit Control plus, Command plus if you're on a Mac, and I'll zoom in. With my Quick Selection tool active, I'm going to lower the size of it a little bit, kind of decrease the brush size by hitting my left bracket key on my keyboard. I want to make it a little bit smaller so I have more precision control. And I can see that I'm already kind of running into some issues. It's selecting a bunch of stuff that I don't want. Okay. Now the cool thing about this tool is that there are different modes of it. There is the new selection, which is by default where you select your new items on the stage. There's the add to selection, which will let you grab new things to add to the area you've selected. And then there's the delete selection. So if you're, or subtract from selection actually. So if you're kind of in one of these areas like I am, where I have some selections that are maybe going out into these leaves and I don't want them, I can mouse over and delete from my selection, or subtract from my selection rather, and that tightens things up for me. Okay, so if I just get this little spot up here, I'm just about good to go. Now it's important when you use tools like this, when you use a brush tool or one of these selection tools, you should release the mouse whenever you make a selection that's suitable. You don't want to just click and hold it and keep on going, because it's going to record your full brush stroke. So if I make some selections and they're good and then I want to take something away from it, I want to kind of do it in little increments at a time. Otherwise I'll have issues. Now right here it's kind of tight. Let me make my brush size smaller with that left bracket, and I'm still going to have some issues here. So right now I'm just going to leave that alone. Okay, I can come back later and fix that and tighten up the image a little bit. Okay, just want to make sure I have things selected. It looks kind of rough around the edges, but I can work with it. For more precision, I'm just switching tools now to the add to selection to get that little piece there. For more precision, I can go in there, like I said, with the pen tool, make that outline and convert that. That would definitely be the way to go with something like this where you have a lot of noisy background. Anyway, if I want to start coloring this, I can use a technique called variations, which is very easy to work with, very fun. I can go up to Image, Adjustments, and then drop down until I find Variations. When I get Variations open, I have kind of a color palette where I can start to mix colors. I can choose shadows, midtones, highlights, or saturation. I'm going to leave it at midtones, which is going to kind of adjust the main color of the image. And from here, I can start to blend until I get a kind of an orange look. And you'll see the way it looks where it says current pick. As I start to blend it, you'll see the color change there. So I can, keep blending colors until I get kind of a nice orange that I like. And then over here to the right, I can lighten that, I can darken it. Okay, I'll darken it a little bit, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right, so now I've got an orange pumpkin. It's got some problems. There are some selections here for the eyes and things, so I'm going to select those areas actually. So first I'll go select, deselect, so I can start from scratch. And now what I want to do is I want to get these eye areas and the nose and the mouth and desaturate that so I can change the color. So I've got my quick selection tool. I hit select. I'm going to hold down shift and click to make new selections. Okay, and then again I'm going to go to image, adjustments, desaturate to get the color out of there. And I'll get this eye over here too. Image, adjustments, desaturate. Okay, And now with all of those still selected, I can start to come in here and add some color. I can use variations one more time. I can also start to paint. So since we already looked at variations, I'm going to look at painting a little bit. So I'm going to make a new layer right now. And on this layer, I'm going to paint. So I'm going to go over here to my color selection, select black, hit OK. And I'm going to come down here and get my paintbrush. And I'm going to increase my brush size. And then I'm just going to paint. Now that will only paint inside of the selection, so I don't have to worry about bumping into any other areas. Okay, so that painted the inside of that pumpkin nice and black. I can then select, deselect, get rid of my lines, and that's a pretty nice little effect. I'll go over here to my layers again, and I'll double click this, and I'll call it maybe black eyes and mouth. Double click on, double click on the layer here. And I'm getting everything to pop up except for what I want right now. I'm trying to just get my layer properties open, so I'll right click, and there's also an option through right click to add layer properties. So let's say I'll come over here and say gray. Okay, which leaves it kind of as the default. I can do that again, maybe say yellow, and you'll see that it changes the color yellow. Okay, now I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to create a new layer. This time I'm going to select the stem, desaturate that, and I'll color it green. I'm also going to see if I can grab this little piece of orange here too, if I can get that and desaturate that as well. Kind of tighten up my image a little bit. Okay, let me go back to my jack-o'-lantern. I was on the wrong layer. Okay, so I can get this little piece. Okay, got that. And with that selected, I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate, and there we go. I fixed that little problem from before. Select, deselect, or Control D. And now I'm going to select this area of the stem. Okay, this one's going to be kind of funny too, it looks like. I'm just getting a couple of the little overspill pieces from my earlier selection. I'll change to the Subtract from Selection tool. I'm going to come in here and kind of paint a little bit. Clean this up a little bit. Yeah, it's still kind of giving me some problems. This is going to be a little tight. Take a little bit of finesse. I'll change the tool one more time. Go back, see if I can outsmart it. Almost. Pretty close. Close enough. Okay, so Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. Desaturates everything. Now I'm going to select a color. I'm going to select a bright green. Okay. And I'm going to use a blending mode on this so I can come up with some different effects. So I'll select this bright green, hit OK. And I'm going to get my paintbrush one more time. Let's see, right here we go. And I will use my left bracket to make my paintbrush smaller. I'm not going to go crazy on this one because I don't want to get a lot of that area that I over selected. I'm going to have to go back and fix it, and you know, no reason to be sloppy. Okay, so this looks pretty crazy here, and actually I made a mistake, so I'm going to hit Control Z and do it again. And the mistake I made is I started to color on the layer that I was on. I don't want to do that. I want to color on the new layer over here called Layer 1, because I'm going to apply blending options, blending modes that will change the way that layer looks. So let me make sure I'm selected the right layer, and now I'm going to go back and do that again. I'll just come in here, paint this nice neon looking fluorescent kind of green, paint the stem. Okay, so now that really looks out of place. It looks like the pumpkin's radioactive or something, so we want to change that. So what I'm going to do is just come here in the layers palette where it says normal, and I'm going to choose one of my blending modes like multiply. Okay, and that will definitely change the color. And there's a bunch of them I can go through. I can try overlay, sometimes that looks better. Okay, several different options to try from. Okay, darken might work. Darken looks alright. And I can also change the opacity next to the blending mode option. I can come in here and drop my opacity a little bit so more of the black and white shows through, and it looks kind of like a desaturated green. I like that. Select, deselect, or Control D, and I have a pumpkin. Now I can go through, I can continue to color the leaves and the branches and really turn this into a full-fledged recolorization.